Welcome, and thank you for joining us for this evening's event with Carrie Turansky, author of The Legacy of Longdale Manor. Tonight's program is brought to you by Save Ellis Island, the nonprofit partner of the National Park Service for the restoration and reuse of the historic hospital buildings on Ellis Island's south side. My name is Cathy Gohlke. My last visit here at Save Ellis Island was with the wonderful and best-selling award-winning author Susan Meisner, who interviewed me for my recent book, Ladies of the Lake, and before that, Band of Sisters. Both of those interviews were recorded and are still available through the Save Ellis Island website if you'd like to see and hear them. Autographed copies of my books and many other wonderful books featured on Save Ellis Island programs are available to purchase through the online bookshop. I'm excited to be back with Save Ellis Island tonight in conversation with my friend, author Carrie Turansky. Carrie is the award-winning author of 22 inspirational novels and novellas, and a winner of the ACFW Carroll Award, the International Digital Award, and the Holt Medallion. She loves traveling to England to research her Edwardian novels, including The Legacy of Longdale Manor, as well as No Ocean Too Wide and the Highland Hall series. Her novels have received starred reviews from christianbooks.com and Library Journal, and they've been translated into several languages to be enjoyed by readers around the world. You can learn more about Carrie at her website, carrieturansky.com. Thank you, Carrie, for being with us tonight. And listeners, if you have questions for Carrie, please type them in the chat. We'll be taking those questions from the audience at the end of our program. Also, a lucky guest with us tonight will win a signed copy of The Legacy of Longdale Manor. So stay tuned to the end when we'll announce the winner. We want to thank Bethany House Publishers for this giveaway. Welcome, Carrie. Let's see.
Friends.
Oh. I need to come back. Welcome, Carrie. We're so glad to have you here.
Thanks, Cathy. I'm glad to be here with you tonight. I'm really looking forward to our conversation and connecting with our friends that are here with us.
Oh, great. I am too. So let's get right to it. I just want to talk about your book, The Legacy of Longdale Manor. This is a beautiful, beautiful book, inside and out. And I love this cover. I don't know, for me, it hints at secrets and legacy and all kinds of wonderful things. So when people ask you about the book, what do you tell them?
Well, I like to say that The Legacy of Longdale Manor is a dual-time novel, and it's set in England's Lake District. And it's about two women who will live a century apart, and they're seeking healing, faith, and forgiveness. And the contemporary story focuses on Gwen, who's a young art historian, and she travels to the Lake District, to the Longdale Manor, where she's going to evaluate the paintings and the antiques for the owners there because they're trying to save their crumbling manor house. And then our historical heroine is Charlotte, and she and her family suffer a tragedy and a betrayal, and they also travel to the Lake District and are hoping to find a home with Charlotte's grandfather, who owns Longdale Manor, and this, of course, is 100 years in the past. And the things that tie this two plots together are an old photograph and a intricately carved shepherd's staff, and then this 100-year-old journal that Charlotte writes, and then that Gwen reads and finds healing for her heart.
Oh, wow. Oh, that sounds so good. And I know that you've said it in the Lake District. The Lake District is breathtakingly beautiful. And I just want to talk with you a little bit about that because we share a wonderful history about that. Yeah. Carrie and I, I think, was it 2015? I think.
Yeah.
Maybe 2015. We went to England. We were researching Carrie's book, and we were researching a book for me. So we went to the Lake District, and it's just amazing. I think it was early May. One of my favorite memories. We were just beyond the daffodils, but we went to Wordsworth's home, And every time I see a daffodil, which they're all over the place right now, I think of his poem, and let's see if I have it here. I wrote this down because I wanted to share it. He said, I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high o'er vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils, beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. I just love that. And I saw on Facebook pictures of your home, Carrie, where you have just so many beautiful golden daffodils, and you made me think of that.
Yeah,
And
that was such a wonderful trip. I have many happy memories too. I love that we got to go there and do some research for our books. And my probably favorite memory, a couple of them. One was going to Beatrix Potter's Hilltop Farm, where we got to go into her house and into her gardens and see a lot of the settings that she had in the background of her drawings for her children's books, Peter Rabbit, that kind of thing. So that was wonderful. I just really enjoyed that. And then we visited some different villages, and one was Grassmere, and we got to sample the famous Grassmere gingerbread, and I liked that so much, such a fun memory that I put that in my book, The Legacy of Longdale Manor, since they're set right by that where that village would be. So I had them enjoying some of that gingerbread.
I think you put that recipe on your website as well?
I did, yeah, I did. And I
Oh,
made it
good.
myself and had it at our book launch party that you were with me and shared it
Mhm.
with friends there. And some people were surprised because they're used to American gingerbread, which is very soft and cake-like, but this gingerbread is more like a chewy, spicy cookie
Yeah,
with a crumbly topping. It's very unique, but I do have the recipe on my website. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's so good. And one other thing I just loved, the woods and hillsides were filled with bluebells. I
Oh,
just
yeah.
love those just carpets of bluebells. And it motivated me to plant bluebell bulbs last fall. I planted 100 of them. So I'm hoping that this spring I will get lots of bluebells
I
and
planted a
wine.
few last fall. Also, a friend gave me a pot of them. So I put them in last year too, and I've been watching to see. I see some leaves coming up. So we'll
Yeah.
probably have some
Yeah,
bluebells.
that's all I see too so far, but yeah, I'm excited. And one of the things you brought out in your book that I just love and remember is we were about a month after the little lambs had been born,
Yes.
and on the hillsides, all those little baby tottering lambs butting up against their mothers for their lunch. It was just beautiful. And the flowers everywhere. So I don't know, listeners, if you've never been to the Lake District, put it on your bucket list. It's wonderful.
Definitely.
So, Carrie, tell me, why did you decide to set this particular book in the Lake District?
Well, just the memories from that trip made me think about, that I wanted to write some story there. And of course, that was like 9 years ago, but I still had that idea in my mind. Sometime I have to write a story there so I could kind of relive those experiences. And I
Sure.
looked online for a manor house, a real manor house, and I found one that was near Lake Windermere. And I thought, well, I could set my book in that area. And so I kind of took off with that idea after finding that beautiful house, which has since been turned into a hotel. So I really enjoyed finding those pictures and remembering our fun trip there.
And don't you usually put those pictures on Pinterest? Do you have a Pinterest board for
Yeah, I
this?
do. I have a Pinterest board for each one of my books, so I encourage people to look me up on Pinterest, and you'll find those boards for the Legacy of Longdale Manor, and you can see lots of beautiful images of the setting and the characters and the manor house. So that's a fun thing to take a look at.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful pictures. Carrie has an art background, and everything she does, whether it's her newsletter or her Pinterest board or whatever it is, just beautiful. And I'm totally jealous, but I love to see what you have. It's really
Thank you.
great. Yeah, I love dual timeline stories. They've become very popular, and I think people love seeing, what's going on in today's life, their life today, and then seeing a reflection of that in some way in the past.
Mhm.
What made you decide to make a dual timeline story of this? And although I know you've mentioned things like the journal and the shepherd staff that connected them, what are the themes that connect the plots?
Well, I first proposed this story as a historical, but it did not get accepted. And then right after that, I kind of watched what the winning books were in the Christie Awards, and several of them were dual time. And I thought, well, I've written historical books and I've written contemporary. Why don't I just write a dual time story and see if
There you go.
propose it that way and see if that might interest a publisher. I had no idea how challenging that would be and what would be involved in that, but I just plunged ahead, and the publisher that I happened to speak to, the editor, they liked the idea. So then I had to jump in and write the story. And I wasn't sure exactly how to do it, but I remember I emailed you or called you and asked you kind of how you did it when you do your dual time, and you suggested that I write the historical first and then write the contemporary and then just pray and ask the Lord to show me how to put them together. So I did have the themes and ideas in mind in the historical. So then I was able to create the contemporary. I wanted there to be that connection, that both stories would, reflect some of the same themes. So we have themes about fatherhood and, family drama, that kind of thing. So I kind of created the contemporary story just to fit with the historical that I already had in mind.
Well, it works really well.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I love those. So many of us have father issues, and I just love how you wove very different fathers, very different daughters, but it absolutely works. Absolutely works. Well, let's get to the heart of your story. What is the seed that inspired the legacy of Longdale Manor?
Well, I always have admired a famous apologist who is named Ravi Zacharias, and I was very saddened to learn after his death that it was discovered that he had been leading like a double life. And I just felt so sorry for his family, his wife and his adult children who were in ministry with him. And I just thought, how in the world is God going to help them recover from this? How are they going to uh, be restored in their faith and just in their family? What would it take, and how would God accomplish that? And so that kind of inspired the historical story. Of course, I'm, set back in time, but a similar type of situation where there's a discovery like this, and then the family has to work through it. So that was kind of the inspiration for the historical part. And then the contemporary part, I just took a lot of imagination to try to think what would fit with that in a contemporary time, and how would, who would go to the Lake District and how would they get to Longdale Manor? What would that be like? So that one was just sort of put together with lots of prayer and imagination.
Oh, well, I mean, I'm sure that works, but you really can't tell that you didn't have that all plotted out in detail ahead of time. It's just really good. Your story just has all this potential for intrigue and all these different family issues that come to bear. And I'm wondering if you could give us a sneak peek from your book.
Sure, I'd be glad to do that. And I thank you for giving me an idea of what part to read. So that was really helpful. So I'm going
to go off screen so we can for that, so we can see you there.
Oh, okay. I don't know. Will that work like that?
Yeah, you're good. Go ahead.
Okay, great. All right. So I'm going to be reading. This is early on in the story. It's the historical section, and it is Charlotte's kind of cleaning up in her father's office at their home in London, and she makes a discovery. So I'll just read a few pages. She pulled out the right drawer and found several letters, a few files with information about the students he had tutored. She sorted through the pile of envelopes and found one from New York. She pushed in the drawer, but it stopped a few inches short. Had something fallen behind, preventing it from closing? With a weary sigh, she pulled open the drawer, took out the files, and tried to push it closed. Once again, the drawer stuck. Frowning, she bent down and peeked in. She couldn't see anything blocking the way, but when she reached in and felt around the back of the drawer, her fingers closed around what felt like a small bundle of papers. She pulled out a stack of envelopes tied with a blue ribbon. Who were they from? There was no address on the top envelope, only the name Henry, written in elegant script. She untied the ribbon and uneasiness prickled through her. Were these letters that Mum had written to Father while they were courting? Had he kept them all these years to remind himself of those early days of their love? She considered asking Mum about them, but Charlotte didn't want to cause her any more pain. She slid the folded stationery from the envelope, turned toward the window, and let the light shine on the words. Dearest Henry, how I miss you and long to see you again. When can you come? It seems like ages since we had those few stolen days in Cornwall. Charlotte frowned. When had her mom been in Cornwall? How I wish our circumstances were different and we could let the world know of our love. The lonely days and nights only serve to remind me of all those blissful days we spent together. Oh, my darling, I count the hours until we can be together again. Please know that you fill my mind and heart. With all my love, E.M. Charlotte froze, staring at the initials. Who was E.M.? Someone her father had loved before he met and married Mum? Her eyes darted to the date written at the top of the page, 8 January 1910. Charlotte gasped, and a wave of dizziness flooded her. She sank down in the desk chair and lifted her hands to cover her her eyes. This couldn't have been written to her father only 2 years ago. That would mean, no, he couldn't have betrayed her mom. She dropped her hand and scanned the letter once more. The passionate words could hold only one meaning. Heat surged into her face and angry tears flooded her eyes. How could her father stand in the pulpit night after night and exhort others to gain total victory over temptation and sin when he had been involved with another woman? How could he be such a hypocrite? Was this why he'd asked them to forgive him after he collapsed? Was this why the Lord had struck him down and ended his ministry? Her hand shook as she pulled out the next letter, but halfway down the page, she closed her eyes and crumpled the paper. She couldn't read anymore. It was too painful, too dreadful to think of her father caught in sin and living a lie. The door opened and Alice walked in carrying a cup and saucer. Charlotte quickly shuddered her emotions. She must never let her sister know of her father's secret sin. Alice adored him. It would shatter her heart. I brought you some tea and biscuits. Her sister crossed the room and set the teacup on the desk. Charlotte shoved the letters in the drawer and pushed it closed. Alice's smile faded. What's wrong? Charlotte looked away. Nothing. She picked up the stack of files from the desk and placed them in an empty crate. Then she reached for the correspondence. Aren't you going to have your tea? Charlotte blinked, her thoughts spinning. Yes, thank you. I just want to clear off the desk. Do you think I should take a cup up to Mom? Charlotte forced her shaking hands to still. Mom might be resting, but sending Alice off with this task would get her out of the room and give Charlotte time to decide what to do. Yes, that's a good idea. A cup of tea might be just what she needs. She forced a smile, and Alice hurried off toward the kitchen. As soon as her sister disappeared, Charlotte pulled open the drawer and took out the letters. Her stomach roiled as she stared at the stack clutched in her hand. Mum must never see these letters. She was already so deeply grieved by Father's death. Learning he had been unfaithful would break her heart, and in her weakened condition, that painful revelation might kill her. Charlotte strode to the fireplace. No one must ever know her father's teaching had only been a cover for his sin. She tossed the letters into the fire. The flames leaped up and singed the edges of the envelopes. A fiery red line burned across the face of the envelope, turning it brown until all that remained was gray ash, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. The fire might have destroyed the proof of his guilt, but the words were branded in Charlotte's mind, searing her soul and burning the truth of his betrayal deep into her heart. Okay.
Wow. Wow. I would have to read the book to find out what Charlotte does with that terrible secret. And to carry such a heart burden yourself, even though you're protecting the people that you love, how hard is that? That is just really hard. And to just not tell, that's just that's a real dilemma for her. And yet in the story, I remember that both modern day Gwen and 1912 Charlotte, who you've just read about, they share a lot of secrets, a lot of different similarities. And I was wondering, can you tell us some of what those similarities are and how they feed the plot?
Sorry about that noise there. That's my Amazon talking. Well, both heroines have been impacted by their relationship with their father. So Gwen, of course, has never known her father, and she longs to find him and experience, that love and connection with him and that acceptance. And then Charlotte, of course, loved and deeply admired her father, and then she's heartbroken when she makes these discoveries that he's not the man that she believed that he was. So they both need to work through those issues of forgiveness of their earthly fathers and understand more deeply the love of their heavenly fathers. So yeah, they both have issues kind of different but interwoven there as far as relationships with dads.
Yeah, those are strong connections. Secrets and betrayal and disappointment and disillusionment, those are really deep wounds.
Yeah.
And especially when they come from a parent or a religious leader or a teacher or just someone we trust, somebody with authority in our lives. And I think trust and betrayal of trust is the real heart issue there. Tragically, I'm just thinking that those deep wounds often shape our lives and our worldviews as well, the way we view other people and relationships. So how is that true for your characters, for Charlotte and for Gwen?
Well, it, particularly affects Charlotte because it made her doubt her faith, and it made her doubt that she could trust men, especially Ian, who becomes the historical heroine, the shepherd that she and her family initially want to go stay with their grandfather at Longdale Manor, but Charlotte's mother and grandfather have had a parting in their relationship. And so it's another father issue there that kind of comes up in the story. So they go to stay on a farm, a sheep farm, and she meets Ian, who kind of reminds her of her father in some ways. So initially she's kind of, doesn't trust him. And so it does have a big impact on her. Because initially, she kind of remembers her dad when she sees Ian, who's very outgoing, kind of a lively person, and even looks a little bit like her father. So that makes it hard for her and to separate them kind of in her heart and mind.
Yeah, such deep father wounds. One because of his betrayal and pretending to be something he wasn't, and one because he was just not there at all. And I think a lot of people can relate to at least one of those things in life. So you've already touched on this a little bit, but how this has shaped Charlotte's view of men and relationships, but how did it shape Gwen's?
Well, since Gwen has never known her father, I mean, I think in the story, she kind of shows that she feels like she doesn't maybe know how to, if about relationships, it really affects her in that way too. So she lacks confidence in relationships and maybe has made some choices in the past that are not the best. So she has, a young man in her story who is the grandson of the owner of Longdale Manor, who's there to help his grandmother with this crumbling estate, and they're trying to decide how they're going to save it. And happens to be in the business of renovating, beautiful old historic homes and turning them into either apartments or spas or hotels, that kind of thing. So he's going to help his grandmother do that. So, their friendship has kind of a rocky beginning, and she's uncertain then too of, how to have a healthy relationship because she hasn't had her dad in her life. And so she needs to really kind of work through that too and learn how to, get to know him and trust him. And he's very supportive. So that's helpful to her. And that's part of the story.
Yeah, that's really, I think it hits a lot of people, a lot of fathers in life are absent. And so it's so interesting that you've hit on two really sore topics, but that so many people can relate to, really. Yeah. So in your story, Gwen hopes to find the father she never knew and establish a new relationship. But Charlotte discovers her father's betrayal after he has died. So she cannot confront him. She cannot talk with him about it or anything. So how is it possible for Charlotte or for any of us in that kind of a situation who've, maybe we've discovered something after a father or a parent, could be a mother even, has died, and something that either was not addressed or was not settled. How can a person, how does Charlotte get peace, and how can we get peace in those situations?
Yeah, that was what I was, working through as I was trying to write this story. I was going to think, who's going to help Charlotte? How are we going to help her work through this? So I tried to think of different ways that God's worked in my life and in the lives of people that I know. So I have Charlotte interact with her pastor personally when she has kind of a breakdown and she's upset about some different things. She talks to him and he gives her some wisdom. And then she also goes, writing in her journal is very helpful to her, just putting down her thoughts there and kind of pouring them out. And then eventually, at first, she's kind of resistant to prayer because she's, kind of separated herself from the Lord. But eventually, she's back to praying again and writing in her journal. And then she observes people who are forgiving and are living out their faith. Her mother, she's very impressed with how her mother is handling just the grief in her life and her willingness to stay close to the Lord as she works through just, Charlotte thinks it's just the pain of losing her husband, but, the mother actually, I don't want to give away the story, but there's more going on there. So her mother's example is great help to her. And then also Ian, she keeps it a secret for quite a while, but eventually she does tell the pastor and she does tell Ian. And then, they help her talk it through. And then as she watches her mother restore her relationship with the grandfather, that's also an example for her. So I try to think of all these different ways. How does God work in our life? How does he show us how to resolve painful issues? And I tried to, put those into the story. She learns that
Really
we're
helpful.
not, go ahead.
I just said, I love that. That's really helpful. Sometimes we just really need to see how a character in a book does something. And
Yes.
I know our lives aren't books, but it gives us good ideas. Can give
Yeah,
us really good ideas.
I hope so. That's kind of my hope, is that people who have a similar situation would take some of the lessons that Charlotte learns and they'd be able to transfer them to our own lives. So one of those lessons is that knowing we're not designed to carry the justice of the world on our own shoulders, and that it's God's job to judge and carry out vengeance or mercy, that can really free us up. Forgiveness and releasing offenses is just so important for our own peace of mind and for our relationships. And I've lately done a Bible study that just pointed out to me that holding on to offenses is one of Satan's tools to separate us from fellowship with God and with others, and to keep us bound and unhappy and unuseful. So it's just very important. A lot of times we just think, oh, I know I should forgive, but there's so much more there that God wants to, use this in our life and help us. And we need to be able to let some of these things be transferred to him to carry out the justice and the mercy, whatever's needed, and not try to carry that out ourselves or hold on to that unforgiveness, because it's just going to hurt us.
Yeah. I think our world is so primed to take offense these days, and
Yeah.
to offend, but also to take offense, and then to offend as again. So that's really important. I love that you have that in the book. There's a moment when Charlotte reacts very strongly and very negatively toward Ian, and he simply cannot understand where in the world she's coming from. And I don't want to give spoilers, but one of your characters explains, and this is a quote: when someone's reaction to a situation seems out of proportion, it usually points back to some previous experience, some hurt they are still carrying. I thought that was so profound, Carrie. Talk to us about that a little bit.
Well, that's something I've learned just from reading about counseling and listening to Christian counselors, that if we have a strong reaction to something, we need to kind of check ourselves because it can be that we're holding on to hurts and unforgiveness. And when something comes up that reminds us of those painful things in the past, it might not be exactly like it, but it might just stir up the same type of feeling. They call those triggers, like in counseling. And it can point back to something, a previous experience where there's some hurt that we're still carrying and we need to resolve with the Lord. So, that's just an important thing to consider. That, I mean, and even in our relationship with other people, when somebody overreacts, you might think, wow, I just said this or whatever, but it might mean that they have some kind of hurt or experience in the past that's making them react like that. So you want to just maybe give grace and ask a question and try to see what it is and try to help them with it.
Yeah, that's a good point, because it's so easily to react by taking offense, again. So no, that's really great. That's good. Let's see. Gwen's mother, this was interesting to me. Gwen's mother planned to tell Gwen the truth about her real father when Gwen graduated from college. But she waited until by waiting that long, the mother died tragically before that could happen, very shortly before that could happen.
Mhm.
And I wondered why did her mother want to wait that long to tell Gwen and about her father? And was that fair to Gwen?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think she waited because initially it was an unhappy memory. And then time passed, and I think she felt torn about her role in the separation between her and her ex-husband. So I think she put it off because she didn't want to face the problem. And she was fearful that Gwen might not understand or feel resentful toward her. I think she initially might have had good motives of protecting Gwen, but the longer she waited, the harder it was to face that discussion with her daughter. But I'm glad she did because that made the story more dramatic, right?
It certainly did.
It had to be a setup for that. So, I just felt like it was realistic that that could happen. Someone could, feel uncomfortable about it and put it off and just think, I will when I have to, but I don't want to do it right now. So that
Yeah.
was kind of the way
I'd never heard about that kind of a situation, but it does ring true. I've heard of cases where children were adopted and the parents think, oh, well, I'll wait until they're grown. I'll wait till they're 18. I'll wait till they're 25. I'll wait till they have a child or might need to know medical history before I tell them.
yeah.
And you can well imagine that that day might never come if the parent or doesn't live that long. So that was very interesting to me. A real dynamic. Yeah. When Gwen finally learns who and where her father is, she's afraid to phone him. She's really nervous about that. She knows if she connects with him, she's going to have to give up her fantasies that she's created all her life about him, about how she imagines that he probably never really knew she existed, that he's a wonderful father and he can't wait to meet her and all of that. So that was a new thought to me that she might have to give up her fantasies. And I'm wondering, do you think that's a common fear that many of us face in facing the truth about people or situations, knowing that we have to give up the fantasy we've created about them?
I think so. And since you brought up the idea of adopted children, it may be for those people who are adopted too that think, do I want to connect with my birth parents? And if I do, I'll have to give up what I've imagined about them. So it's a similar kind of thing, I would think, for someone who never met their father or somebody who is, adopted and wondering about their birth family. I know some people do want, to do it, and others, feel like, no, I don't want to face that. And I thought for Gwen, I just thought that was the kind of person that she was, that she had always had this, imagined for her to deal with it. She had to make up a story in her own mind that it must be because he doesn't know I was, I was born, and it must be because if he knew, he wouldn't have been gone all these years. So I think she created that in her mind to kind of help her deal with it. And then she's faced with, oh, here he really is. I don't know what he'll be like or how he'll respond to me. And it would
Yeah.
take real courage, I would think, to make that call and make that connection because she doesn't know for sure who he is or how he'll respond. So
Or why he hasn't reached out to her.
yes,
She
she
can't
has
really
to,
know.
find out the truth.
Yeah. Yeah. The truth can be hard to face sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, when Gwen's father apologizes to Gwen for the hurt that he's caused in her and her mother's life, he really sounds sincere. But as you wrote, is one heartfelt apology enough to make up for years of pain and separation? And that is a really good question. It's easy to say you're sorry after many, many years, but it's not still not so easy for the person that needs the healing. So how did Gwen reconcile with that? And how can we, if we find ourselves in a similar situation?
Well, I wanted that to be realistic, so I didn't have her say yes right away. I had her struggle a bit with it and,
Mhm.
say that she needed time. She was honest with her father and says that she needed to think about it.
Yeah.
Um, because if she said yes, it could feel like she's just letting him off the hook, for the years of separation and the hurt.
Mhm.
But, when, and this is true for all of us, when we consider our own weaknesses and failures and the way we have probably hurt people, and for sure we've offended God by our sins and are going our own way, kind of a thing, we know how much we need forgiveness and how much God loves and forgives us. I think I tried to show that in the story that when she wrestles with that, she considers that herself and is able to see how much she is in need of forgiveness in her own life. Then that makes it her willing to take that first step of saying, that she would open the door to the relationship and she would say, I want to forgive you and move forward with that.
Yeah.
So I think that, his honest confession and his explanation about why he was out of her life and how he did try to come back, earlier and try to see her and her mom. I think that also helped because it gave, she got to see a little bit of his own desire that he really had wanted to be part of their life and felt like
Yeah.
it wasn't the best thing. So those things all came together, hopefully, to help her to work through that.
Yeah. Yeah. That was good. Charlotte wrote in her journal, when we choose to forgive others, we are not excusing what they did or saying it was right. We're releasing them into God's hands and allowing him to deal out justice as he sees fit. And I know that you covered that. I think you covered that pretty well already. And that's a relief that we don't have to do it, isn't it? It's not up
Yeah.
to us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And God is really the only one who, sees into everyone's heart. He
Yeah.
understands the truth behind every situation. So he's really the only one who's worthy to be the judge and deal righteously with, hurtful situations. So he wants us to
Yeah.
give our hurts to him and just release the person who hurt us so that he can deal with it. And he doesn't want us to have to carry that burden.
Yeah. But you also wrote that forgiveness is not a one-time thing, but that it takes time to peel back the layers and work through. And I think that's true, but so often we hear, forgive and forget, but it doesn't really work just quite like that, does it?
No, I don't think so. I think really it is a process. And, we
Mhm.
may come to a place where we are working through some kind of hurtful situation and we are ready to say, I forgive you. But then the next day we may feel that hurt again and have those memories. But I think that's okay. I mean, I think it's a process we're working through and God may keep bringing it up and then we can release that again and say, I do forgive. I release that person into God's hands to judge and take care of this for me. So that's okay. They say it's like an onion, peeling away the different layers. And
Yep.
it takes time and that's okay. And that's usually not forgive and forget. It's usually forgive and keep on forgiving. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I get that.
Yeah.
There's a passage from Charlotte's 1912 journal that came to have great meaning for modern day Gwen as she read the journal. And it reads, time is fleeting, the days fade fast. Treasure faith and family, only they will last. Share with us what that means to you, Carrie, please.
Well, as I get older, time seems to be speeding by. My children, I have 5 adult children, I have 11 grandchildren, and 1 more on the way. They're all growing up and, moving on to new phases of life. And I can look back now and see, what's most important to me, and that is my faith and my family. And that's what I treasure. And as I was getting ready to finish up this book, I was praying and thinking, I really want to, weave that kind of a message in there. How am I going to do that, Lord? And he just gave me those words one night. I got up, wrote them down, and I thought, well, that's kind of the heart of the story. So I had Charlotte be the one who wrote them in the journal, but they are meaningful to me too.
That's wonderful. It's wonderful how that works sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah, very wonderful.
So what do you hope that readers will take away from the legacy of Longdale Manor?
Well, I want to give them that virtual trip to the Lake District. Hope they'll just be swept away and feel like they have traveled to England, where they can enjoy the family drama and the romance and the inspiration in the story. But I also hope that they'll see the importance of their faith in overcoming hurt and betrayal, and that they'll be willing to do their part to bring healing when there are broken family relationships and forgiveness is needed. And then that theme about God being our loving Heavenly Father, who is always there for us, the one that we truly need. I hope readers will take that to heart, and maybe the story will even motivate some of them to want to put it on their bucket list, like you said, travel to England's Lake District and just experience that beauty there themselves.
Great. The Legacy of Longdale Manor. It is a lovely, lovely book. And I want to remind everyone who's joined us tonight that you can purchase an autographed copy of The Legacy of Longdale Manor through the Save Ellis Island website. It's a wonderful opportunity not only to have your own autographed copy from Carrie, but also the proceeds from the sales of these books go to help in the restoration of Ellis Island's hospital buildings, one of our nation's treasures. So this is a way you can help. This is a win-win. So Carrie, tell us what is next on your horizon? What are you working on now? And when does your next book release? Please. We want to know.
Okay, my next novel is called A Token of Love, and it's also a dual-time novel. It's set in London. It's a little bit farther back, late Victorian, 1885, and contemporary times in London, and it's based on the history of the Foundling Hospital, which was the first charity home for abandoned babies in England. It started way back in the 1700s. And also, the story is inspired by the life of Josephine Butler, who was a very interesting woman with deep faith who led movements to change laws to protect women and girls and in London. And it's going to include the search for a missing young girl from the Foundling Hospital. There's a mystery, a romance, as well as faith and inspiration. So I'm excited to share that next story with reading friends. I just showed the beautiful new cover online a couple weeks ago. You can see that if you're my friend on Facebook or join my author list, you'll see it there, or on Pinterest. So that story releases September 3rd, 2024. And then I'm writing the next one that's going to be a series set in Yorkshire called The Lost Treasures of Yorkshire. But that one's just started. That'll be in 2025. So.
Wow. Lots to look forward to.
Yeah, I'm excited about what's coming up.
Yeah. So I'm definitely looking forward to those. Now, I believe we have some questions from our listeners tonight that we want to take. But before we get to that, we do have a winner for our contest. Let me check the name. The winner for tonight's book, a signed copy by Carrie of The Legacy of Longdale Manor, is Phyllis Gardner. So if you're listening, Phyllis, and I think you must be because your name was drawn, all you have to do is to email your address to info@saveellisisland.org, info@saveellisisland.org, and an autographed copy of The Legacy of Longdale Manor will be mailed to you. So Carrie, I want to thank you so much for spending this time with us and sharing the legacy of Longdale Manor. But before we go, let's see what questions we have from our listeners.
Okay.
Here's our first one. Leslie says, thanks for the opportunity. I thought the book was great. She must have read it already. Question is, how did she write it? Two separate stories first and then work to combine them, or alternate so that she wrote it as we were reading it?
Okay. I think I spoke a little bit about this, but I'll explain a little more. I did write the full historical. I did have a synopsis of the book, so I knew in general where we were going, but I wrote the full historical, so I understood all the themes and issues that my heroine was facing there and thinking about placing in the articles that would eventually connect the two stories. And then I wrote the full contemporary. And then I talked to Cathy, and then I prayed and weaved them together back and forth. And then at the end, I wrote that epilogue that was a contemporary piece that kind of ties the two stories together and has the journal and the photographs and things at the renovated Longdale Manor. So that was a fun experience to kind of put them together in that way. And they fell together very easily. So I thought, oh, writing a dual time is pretty easy. I'll do that next. But then when I wrote the next one that comes out in September, A Token of Love, they did not fall together as easily because some of the things that were happening in the historical, it was out of order. So my poor editor had quite a job, and I had to do quite a bit of rewriting to get the order so that you didn't find out things ahead of time, and you could find them out in the right order. So I just finished the copy edits reading again this week. So that book's pretty much all done. I just have to read the galleys, but it looks like it's in really good shape now, and I'm excited to share that new story with you.
Oh, good. That sounds great. And Zanise says, this book was enjoyable. A contemporary family living in an older manor was an interesting part of the story setting. That is really neat.
Yeah, when Cathy and I went to England, we toured some different historical homes. One of the series that I've written is called Highland Hall, the governess of Highland Hall and other stories. And it's set at a beautiful old manor house that's now owned by the National Trust, which is like their National Historical Society. So it's open to the public. So she and I toured this beautiful manor house together, and we just oohed and awed all around the rooms to see all the beautiful carvings of molding and the big library. And it was just a wonderful chance to step back in time like that and see some of those historic homes in England. That's a real treat.
We even got a special privilege to go back and see the nursery they were working on. And I thought that was so neat to see the toys of the children from long ago.
Yeah, because that first story has a governess and she spends a lot of time in the nursery. So we asked permission, and I told them we had written one book and we're writing a couple more, and they had read it. So they said, sure, we'll take you on a private tour. So that was fun.
That was fun. That was really fun. So here's another question from Leslie. She says, since this one's for me, since this book is almost more about genealogy than immigration, I was wondering why you are presenting it. Well, Save Ellis Island presents a variety of topics and genres. They're not all strictly about immigration. So they do excellent books, and we're just so grateful that Carrie agreed to come and talk about her book with us. Let's see what else we have. Carol says, inspirational presentation. I can hardly wait to read the novel, The Legacy of Longdale Manor. And a couple people asked for your website. Carrie typed it into the chat, so you can find her there. And I'm guessing, and there are links to your Pinterest there too, Carrie, right? Is that right? In your website?
I think you just put my name in, kind of just like you do for the website. So I could
okay.
Yeah. Okay. Not sure.
Let's see. We have just a few more minutes, so I thought maybe I could ask you another question, if you don't mind. What made you decide to write historical fiction?
Well, let's see. We homeschooled our 5 children, and when they were young, we used a curriculum that included a lot of historical fiction. And so we read, I didn't like history in school that much because it was mainly memorizing dates and, a list of wars and that kind of thing. But when we read historical fiction that really dove us into the life of people. I found it so interesting, and my kids loved it, and we just loved reading that historical fiction. And so that really gave me an introduction to it. And one time I was at the library and I found a book that was about the lives of women in the Civil War. And it was just so interesting. And I just thought, oh, to write a book like that where you really are focused on, you bring the history in, but you focus on the people and how the history impacted the people and what a difference that makes and what's unique about that time period. So I just love to research different time periods, and I'm just glad I could and write that. I enjoy contemporary too, but historical is especially fun for me. I love to write historical stories.
So what is your favorite time period to write about?
Well, I think the Edwardian era, which is early 1900s, is my favorite. I was I think Downton Abbey kind of inspired me to get into writing in that era. And it's nice because there's enough history that you feel like you're stepping back in time, but it's still very easy to relate to because there are cars and there are trains, and people can identify with it, but there's still the romance of the different type of dress and customs and culture. So it's a very interesting time period. I really enjoy setting stories there.
I love stories where I can imagine myself in the story and I'm wearing one of those wonderful long dresses. That's just
Yes, and the hats, the lovely hats.
and then
Too.
I
Yeah.
don't know how they balanced some of those big hats on their heads, but they were pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So, do you normally travel to the places where you set your stories?
Well, I've been blessed to go to England 3 times, maybe in the last 10 or so years, to kind of research the stories. But most of my research I do online and through books. But just a couple months ago, we did go to London for a week. That was really a fun trip. I went with my husband, and we were able to visit a lot of the sites in London where this new book, A Token of Love, is set. And there is a foundling museum which tells the history of the foundling hospital with where this home for these abandoned babies, that kind of thing. And so I loved going there, and I connected with the staff and talked to them about the book, and they have a gift shop, so they're going to carry the book in their gift shop. And
Oh,
one of the
wonderful.
unique things about their history is that the mothers who left their children, some of them couldn't read or write, and they would leave some kind of an identifier, and they called these tokens. And it could be anything from a little thimble to a coin to a necklace or a fabric heart. So they have a lot of these on display there, the tokens that the mothers left, because they left them in the hopes that if their situation changed, they could come back and reclaim their child. Very few, were able to do that, but some were. And so I used that idea of the token in this new book that's coming out to kind of help them on the search for this missing girl.
Wow. Wow. I can't wait to read that. I love that kind of a mystery. That is great. So one last question, Carrie, what is your favorite thing about writing?
My favorite thing about writing, I'm kind of torn. One thing I love is when I'm all done and I turn the book in and
Yeah.
hallelujah. Another thing though is just the adventure, the journey of what I learn while I'm writing, because a lot of times it's issues that I'm working through in my own heart and life. And, I'm kind of teaming up with the Lord as He's helping me in the writing process and showing me, how people work through issues in their life. What kind of lies do they believe that get them in trouble? And what kind of truths can we bring in that could help them as they go through these different, conflict is what makes the story exciting. So whatever the conflicts or issues they're facing, I'm, I'm in there trying to figure out how I'm going to help them to reach their goals and work through the issues. And a lot of times the Lord really shows me some interesting ways for that to happen. So that's kind of the fun and interesting part of writing too.
Wonderful. Well, Carrie, we just want to thank you so much for spending the evening with us, with all of us, and for sharing the legacy of Longdale Manor. And we're looking forward to reading your next book.
Oh, thank you so much, Cathy. I really enjoyed our time. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. I did too. On behalf of everyone at Save Ellis Island, thank you, Carrie, for participating in this event. Tonight's presentation has been recorded and will be available on Save Ellis Island's website soon for anyone who was unable to attend tonight, or if you'd like to watch again. You can view some of our past events under the virtual events video section of the website. Congratulations to Phyllis Gardner again. You will receive your signed copy of The Legacy of the Longdale Manor shortly. Thank you again to Bethany House Publishers. If anyone would like an autographed copy of Carrie's book, you can buy it on Save Ellis Island's website. Visit the shop section of www.saveellisisland.org. All proceeds from book purchases directly contributes to Save Ellis Island's preservation efforts. Visit our website to find out about upcoming virtual events and special tours. We hope you'll join us for our next author series virtual event on April 17 with Peter Morton Cohn for a discussion on his book, Ellis Island Interviews, in Their Own Words. Peter will be in conversation with Lori Conway, author of Forgotten Ellis Island. Visit Save Ellis Island's website to become a member. Learn more about the restoration work being done and ways you can donate to help save this national icon and preserve our history for future generations. You may have just received our 2024 membership campaign. Visit Save Ellis Island's website to renew your membership or join as a member. And to show our appreciation, for a donation of $35 or more, we will send you a Save Ellis Island notebook and pen set. Thank you so much for joining us, and good night.